3 a.m. The call comes into dispatch. A man's voice, breathless but strangely measured. "She broke into my house. She's got a gun. She's looking for me inside." Police units tear through the empty streets, emergency lights slicing through the darkness. They arrive at a house where the porch light burns bright, illuminating what's about to become Anderson's most controversial case of the year. Inside that house, an 18-year-old mother named Shamiya Nyair Allen is about to make headlines, but not for the reasons you'd expect. Shamiya wasn't some random intruder. She was the mother of the homeowner's child. The homeowner? Brian Jackson, a 34-year-old tattoo artist who'd been in her life since she was just 16 years old. As officers approach the house, they hear movement inside. Shamiya's voice, desperate and raw. Brian's voice, claiming he's a victim. And then silence. One gunshot. When officers enter, Shamiya Nyair Allen is found with a fatal head wound. Brian Jackson is standing there, unharmed, ready with his story about the break-in. But within hours, Brian's doing something that will expose the truth about this relationship. He's not grieving. He's not calling family. He's not seeking help for anyone. He's posting on Facebook. We're examining every detail of this case, because Shamiya's story isn't just about one tragic night. It's about 2 years of psychological manipulation that started when she was still a teenager. Stay tuned as we reveal everything about this case. Drop a comment and let me know what you think about this story. Welcome to our channel. Make sure to hit the subscribe button. Like and share this video to help raise awareness and spread caution. Let's begin. Growing up in Anderson, Indiana, Shamiya was surrounded by love. Her blended family was massive. Sisters Mikhail, Ashila, India, Asia, and Autumn. Brothers Chris, Bryce, and Arnez. Extended family everywhere. This girl had a village of people who cared about her future. By 18, Shamiya was working harder than most adults. Mornings at Olive Garden, dealing with difficult customers. Evenings at DSA, perfecting her craft as a tattoo artist. This wasn't just a hobby. She had real artistic talent and the business sense to monetize it. 2 jobs, building a career, supporting herself and her 1-year-old son future. But at 16 years old, still a junior in high school, Shamiya crossed paths with Brian Jackson. He was 31. While she was worried about prom and graduation, he was a grown man with fully developed decision-making abilities, life experience, and the confidence that comes with being an adult. Indiana's age of consent laws made their relationship technically legal. But legal doesn't mean appropriate. Legal doesn't mean healthy. By 17, Shamiya was pregnant. She was still in high school when she got pregnant by a 33-year-old man, while her classmates were planning college visits. She was planning a nursery. Her family watched this unfold with growing concern. They tried to intervene, tried to show her the warning signs, tried to protect her from what they could see was an unhealthy dynamic. But Shamiya believed she was in love. What she didn't realize was that she'd become involved with someone who specialized in relationships with much younger women who didn't yet fully understand their worth. Brian Jackson didn't just want a relationship with Shamiya. He wanted her to accept his polyamorous lifestyle, meaning he wanted to maintain relationships with multiple women while expecting loyalty from each of them. The problem? Shamiya never agreed to this arrangement. At 17, she wanted what most teenagers want, to be someone's priority. Brian had other plans. Multiple women rotated through his life, each dealing with the emotional exhaustion of sharing someone who treated relationships casually. Shamiya was expected to accept this arrangement while watching her child's father prioritize other women. The psychological manipulation was textbook. Brian would tell Shamiya she was special, that she was different from the others, while simultaneously making it clear she'd never be enough on her own. Classic manipulation. Make someone feel chosen while ensuring they never feel secure. Shamiya wasn't built for these games. She wanted exclusivity, and she wasn't shy about expressing that. The problem? Brian seemed to thrive on the drama, the jealousy, the competition between his girlfriends, the constant emotional chaos. The other women in Brian's life weren't welcoming either. Multiple women, all competing for attention from someone who was playing them against each other. The tension was constant. Brian had children with multiple partners, creating a complex web of relationships that Shamiya had to navigate while trying to be a young mother herself. Here's where it gets particularly troubling. Brian and Shamiya tried to present a perfect image on social media. They created fitness content together, posting workout videos and family moments like they were living an ideal life. But even during those supposedly happy moments, the dysfunction was visible. People who watched their content noticed fights breaking out mid-workout. Shamiya would leave the camera frame in frustration. The tension was palpable even through the screen. Brian would post about being a devoted father and partner, while behind the scenes he was maintaining multiple relationships and creating an environment so volatile that even their workout sessions became battlegrounds. For Shamiya, this wasn't just emotionally draining. It was psychologically destructive. She was 18 years old, trying to figure out motherhood, working 2 jobs, and competing for attention from someone who had designed the situation so she could never win. Every time she tried to establish boundaries or ask for exclusivity, Brian would remind her that this was his lifestyle. Take it or leave it. But leaving wasn't really an option. They had a child together. She had become financially intertwined. Her family was already concerned about her choices. Brian had created a perfect trap, a situation where Shamiya felt she had to stay and fight for a relationship that was designed to make her miserable. April 2024. The situation escalates dramatically. Brian Jackson gets arrested for domestic battery against Shamiya. The man who had been presenting himself as a victim on social media was now in handcuffs for putting his hands on her. But Brian's legal troubles were just beginning. July 2024, he's arrested again, this time for violating home detention, lying about his identity to police, and fraud charges. Someone who had been lecturing others about responsibility couldn't follow basic court orders. While sitting in jail, Brian took to social media to complain about his situation. November 2024, he posted about hating house arrest, complaining about his earthly troubles like he was a philosophical victim instead of a repeat offender. Meanwhile, Shamiya's world was crumbling. The stress of Brian's arrests, the ongoing drama with his other relationships, trying to raise their son's future. It was all building toward a breaking point. December 11th, 2024. Shamiya reached her limit. She walked into what she thought was her share home and found Brian in bed with another woman. Not just any bed, their bed. The bed where she'd slept, where she'd cared for their baby, where she tried to build something meaningful with this person who kept treating her as disposable. The confrontation that followed was inevitable. Shamiya physically confronted Brian, and police were called. She ended up arrested for criminal mischief and domestic battery. The charges were relatively minor, property damage under $750, but they tell the story of a young woman pushed past her breaking point. Consider the psychology here. Shamiya had been told for 2 years that she needed to accept Brian's other relationships, that she was being immature and possessive for wanting exclusivity. But finding him with another woman in their shared bed was reality, crashing into fantasy Brian had been selling her. Even after all this chaos, they tried to maintain appearances. 2 weeks after Shamiya's arrest, they posted happy birthday content for their son's future, smiling for the camera like nothing had happened. The forced smiles, the fake family moments, the pretense that everything was fine, it was all performance. Behind those birthday photos was a situation so unstable that Child Protective Services had stepped in and removed their son from home. That's right. While they were posting happy family content, their child was living with relatives because DCS had determined the environment was unsafe for him. By January 2025, the pressure had reached a critical point. Multiple arrests, domestic violence charges, a child in protective custody, and 2 people who had been in conflict for months while pretending everything was perfect. January 29th, 2025, the day everything collapsed. Shamiya arrived at Brian's house, but this wasn't a casual visit. Reports indicate she was searching for Brian and the woman he was with. Brian wasn't answering the door. Shamiya found another way in, through a window, into what she still considered her home. Neighbors heard shouting, furniture moving, the sound of someone searching through rooms, calling out names. This wasn't a quiet confrontation. This was 2 years of frustration exploding all at once. Someone called 911. The dispatcher heard a frantic male voice. "She broke into my house. She's got a gun. She's looking for me." Brian Jackson was now portraying himself as the victim of a home invasion. Police units raced through Anderson streets. Multiple officers, lights flashing, treating this as an active threat situation. They moved room by room, trying to locate Shamiya and de-escalate the situation. Then it happened. One gunshot, single shot, echoing through the house. Officers rushed toward the sound. What they found was Shamiya Nyair Allen, 18 years old, with a fatal gunshot wound to the head. She was alone in the room. The weapon was there. Brian was outside, unharmed, ready with a story about the dangerous ex-girlfriend who broke into his house. But here's what makes this particularly disturbing. Brian's first response wasn't call family. It wasn't to grieve. It wasn't to think about their son, who had just lost his mother. His first response was damage control. Within hours of Shamiya's death, Brian Jackson was on Facebook, not posting a heartfelt tribute to the mother of his child, not expressing shock or sadness. He posted, "To whoever gave my BM a gun, she just broke in my house and shot herself in the head." The woman he claimed to love, the mother of his child, had just died tragically, and he was on social media using angry emojis and referring to her as his baby mama, like she was someone who had inconvenienced him. The internet responded immediately. Comments poured in calling him heartless, suspicious, inappropriate. The backlash was so intense that Brian deleted the post, but screenshots had already been captured. But deleting that post was just the beginning of Brian's public relations disaster. Hours after Shamiya's death, something appeared on her Facebook account, a massive wall of text, supposedly written by her before she died, explaining her actions. But as people read it, red flags went up everywhere. This didn't sound like Shamiya. This sounded like Brian Jackson trying to save himself. The post had Shamiya supposedly taking accountability for ruining Brian's life. She allegedly wrote about how she had manipulated him, how she was wrong for trying to change his polyamorous lifestyle, how everything bad that had happened was actually her fault. The post read like a love letter to Brian Jackson written by Brian Jackson himself. The supposed Shamiya wrote, "He was just right for me. I could write a book about the things that prove he loves me and that he's a great man." People who knew Shamiya started commenting, "This doesn't sound like her. She would never write like this." Someone else posted this. "The evidence that Brian wrote it himself is overwhelming." Both Brian's defensive posts and his final letter use identical speech patterns. Same run-on sentences. Same dramatic flair. Same victim mentality wrapped in fake accountability. Both hit the exact same talking points. "Nobody understands me. I was just trying to help. Everyone's judging me unfairly. Both use y'all constantly. SMH, shake my head. LOL in inappropriate contexts." The linguistic fingerprints were identical. The post offended Brian's character using information only Brian would know or care about. It mentioned his financial losses, his house, his car, his job, all framed as things Shamiya supposedly felt guilty about destroying. The fake letter went on for paragraphs, painting Brian as a misunderstood victim who lost everything because of Shamiya's jealousy. It even included a section about how Child Protective Services was wrong to take their son. When people directly asked Brian if he wrote Shamiya's final post, his response was telling. Instead of simply saying, "No, I didn't write it," he went into a defensive rant about death threats and people showing up at his house. Classic deflection. When caught in a lie, change the subject and play victim. While Shamiya's family planned her funeral, Brian Jackson launched into full victim mode. His social media became a showcase of narcissistic damage control. He posted rants about how he was the one suffering, how people were threatening him, how nobody understood what he had been through. The man whose girlfriend had just died was making it all about himself. But here's what's particularly galling. Brian became the very first donor to Shamiya's GoFundMe. He donated $100 like that was supposed to erase 2 years of psychological manipulation. The audacity is staggering. The same person who just faked her final letter was now playing grieving boyfriend, making a public donation so everyone could see what a good guy he was. Meanwhile, People were showing up at his house. Windows getting broken at 5 a.m. The internet had tracked down his address. And they weren't playing games. Brian's response? More victim posts. I can't even grieve because people are trying to hurt me. I'm losing my mind. What would y'all do? But the most heartbreaking voice in all this chaos belonged to Shamiya's mother, Danielle Pearson. Her GoFundMe post cut through Brian's noise. My daughter was manipulated by a 32-year-old man. He drove her to a different level of insanity. This man went as far as to create a post on her behalf after she had already passed. Danielle saw right through Brian's performance. She knew her daughter didn't write that letter. She knew Brian was playing victim while her family grieved a real loss. The contrast was stark. A mother's genuine pain versus a manipulator's theatrical performance. This case exposes something deeply troubling about how we handle predatory relationships. Brian Jackson didn't break any laws when he started pursuing 16-year-old Shamiya, but legality doesn't equal morality. The power imbalance was enormous. A 31-year-old man with life experience targeting a teenager still figuring out who she was. By the time she realized she was trapped, she had a baby, financial dependence, and years of psychological conditioning telling her this was normal. Social media became both weapon and evidence. Brian used it to control narratives, create fake letters, and play victim. But it also preserved his lies for the world to analyze. Young mothers like Shamiya face impossible choices. Stay in toxic relationships or risk losing everything. Society failed her by normalizing age gaps that create these power imbalances. The hashtag Justice for Nyair Allen isn't just about one case. It's about recognizing that legal doesn't mean safe, and that we need better protection for vulnerable young women caught in these predatory dynamics. The official story? Shamiya broke in, police arrived, single gunshot. Case closed. But the inconsistencies are glaring. Why did Brian immediately post angry emojis instead of calling for help? Why fake an entire letter in her voice? Why become the first GoFundMe donor if he's truly innocent? The timeline doesn't add up. The behavior doesn't match genuine grief. The desperation control the narrative raises serious questions. Shamiya's final moments remain a mystery, but Brian's actions afterward tell their own story. An innocent person doesn't need to steal a dead woman's voice to defend themselves. Shamiya left behind her 1-year-old son Future and an unborn child. She deserved so much better than the manipulation and psychological warfare she endured. This case isn't over. The questions remain. The inconsistencies demand answers. Justice for Shamiya means holding people accountable for predatory behavior, even when it's technically legal. It means protecting young women from manipulative older partners. It means recognizing that age gaps in relationships involving teenagers aren't just about love. They're about power. Subscribe now to follow every twist and turn, because the fight for justice for Shamiya is far from over.